Good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining our event this evening on loneliness and menopause. Now, as many women who go through the menopause can tell you, the confidence-stripping changes that our bodies go through can make us all feel very alone, and matters are only made worse by the taboo surrounding the menopause itself. Sometimes it feels like we just have to put up and shut up, exacerbating the idea that we're the only ones suffering. But we're not, and you don't need to feel alone. Now, loneliness is the theme for this year's Mental Health Awareness Week. And this evening, we'll talk about how loneliness can impact our health, the importance of talking, and the positive steps we can take to get through it with two brilliant women and experts in their fields. Now, as a reminder, this event this evening is being recorded and it will be available to view later on. And as ever, feel free to pop any questions that you might have in the chat, share any thoughts you might have, and of course, we leave some time for questions at the end as well. Now, a couple of quick intros before we get going. First off, the menopause expert, my good friend and co-founder, Dr. Clare Spencer. And Claire and I are thrilled to be joined once again by Sue Makin. Sue is a highly qualified and experienced counsellor and sex therapist with over 20 years experience in this area. And Claire and I absolutely love spending time with Sue, and we always leave with a new insight or some new learning from every conversation that we have with her. Now, as I'm sure you'll appreciate, Dr. Clare and Sue won't be able to answer individual specific medical queries, but they can, of course, respond at a more general level. Now, Sue, I'll kick off with a question for you. Now, I'm sure that most of us feel lonely at times. But when it turns from something short-term and temporary into chronic or long-term loneliness, it can have serious effects on our mental health, and it is a significant public health issue. There's a well-known Harvard study that found that the warmth of our relationships throughout life has the greatest impact on our life satisfaction and health. So, Sue, why do you think loneliness can have such a serious impact on our mental health?
Well, in that study and reading a lot of information from Mind as well, which is they have a superb website linked to loneliness. What we found, and I'm sure I found along with lots of other people, that what happened to us around COVID over the last 2 years, there was that loss of community. There was very little chance to socialise with people and a lack of companionship. And so there was that isolation, that feeling of being alone. And being alone is very different to loneliness. But we need interdependence. It's important for us to be around other people. And it does affect our mental health. Mind are very good. They talk about when we need to get back into being around people to take it slow, because we can't just rush back in and say everything is absolutely wonderful, but taking it slow, making new connections. Some people will be very anxious, and we see them in shops, don't we? People still wear their masks. So I think that's very much about how we are maybe going through menopause too. So we're talking about menopause and loneliness. We feel that there's sort of a barrier between us and others. So the research says that what we need is community, companionship and interdependence. And I think that's what we're trying to do today, opening it up, creating a communication, and all the people that are here now, the participants, they want to do that, and it's absolutely wonderful, and hopefully we can learn from them too, as a wonderful group where we can connect.
Yeah, that's lovely. It really is lovely, Sue. It is that the importance of that sense of community, and I think we all learned, even with COVID, that it was almost a re-entry into life when the lockdown restrictions were eased and opened up. It wasn't, as you rightly say, it really wasn't possible to flip that switch. And I suppose many women maybe going through menopause maybe slide into loneliness, and then without being aware of it, And then suddenly one day there's a recognition and a feeling. So Claire, in Dr. Clare, in your experience, can the symptoms of menopause then impact or exacerbate feelings of loneliness or isolation?
Yes, I sadly hear it so frequently in my clinic when you listen to people's stories. So what I hear, because obviously I'm a medical doctor, so I'm listening mainly for the medical side of it, is the result of low estrogen on women's moods, of heightened anxiety, of loss of motivation. And so the consequences, the sort of behavior that results from those symptoms can really stop women connecting. I think that's what I hear. Women will say that they've stopped wanting to go out with their friends, and so their friends have stopped asking them. That I know we'll talk about it in a bit, but the sort of embarrassment about many physical symptoms that stop women going out. The sort of thought that you do have to just get on with it, but maybe you're struggling and maybe you can't just get on with it and you need a little help, which thankfully, if people are talking to me, hopefully they're getting. But no, I hear it so frequently, and how that sort of can build a wall around you, even if you're living amongst other people. And I think Sue put it really nicely. You sort of get used to it in a way, and you get used to that sort of negative slant that loneliness can have, and that low self-esteem that often stems from it and fuels it. And it can be really difficult to then climb out of that, can't it? Even if symptoms are starting to get better, I still think that there is then an aspect, a sort of more psychological aspect of needing to give yourself that slight boost to move out and mingle again. I hear it really frequently, I would say.
Yeah, and it's interesting, if you think about, as a society, we've never been more connected through all of our devices. Yet I imagine at the same time, don't know the statistics off the top of my head, there is almost a pandemic of loneliness as well. When we look at, and as you say, Sue and Claire, you can be in a crowd, you can be in a classroom, you can be in a workplace and surrounded by people and conversations, but still feel really disconnected from it and really, really lonely, which is, as we know, something that we absolutely need to tackle and to support people. Now, we thought long and hard, didn't we, in our chats where we were preparing for the session, about the best way to bring this to life. And you both came upon the brilliant idea of talking about a case study of maybe a typical woman going through the menopause and what her life might be like. So if I can hand over to you now, Sue and Claire, to talk through that case study, and then for both of you to kind of chat through the experiences of this woman, and then your tips and advice for supporting her out of isolation and loneliness to building those connections again.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, so what Sue and I were talking last night, and we thought it might be just a really nice way of illustrating what we're talking about by, this is not a real person. This isn't based on one single person. This is a fictional woman, but experiencing many of the typical symptoms and sort of life stresses and strains that I hear a lot, and I'm sure Sue does too in her practice. So let's just take, for example, 52-year-old woman experiencing symptoms of low mood, feeling flat, irritable, more inclined to shout, going from 0 to 60 in no time at all. Not sleeping, so she's really tired, hot sweats are keeping her awake. She's just feeling really anxious about small things, can't drive on the motorway, just feeling so anxious, getting anxious about just really small tasks that wouldn't usually cause her to bat an eyelid. Low energy, loss of motivation, meaning that she's just not wanting to organize things, take part in family activities, and basically feeling isolated, lonely, and because of these symptoms, adding to that general feeling of unhappiness. In terms of work, it doesn't matter. There are so many different kinds of women who have these experiences. She might be working on the shop floor, might be a solicitor, might be a PA, might be a doctor, might be a nurse, could be a teacher, could be, just having to get out into the workplace. has a partner could be male, could be female, have children. So around our age group, you know, sort of 3 teenagers, might be older, might be younger, age 13, 15, 17, might be more or less children. So children at home, partner, he's or she frustrated, wants to know what's happened to the woman that they initially got together with, feeling rejected at the loss of desire to initiate sex. Loss of libido is an issue, just wants to know what's wrong with you, what's going on. You know, the children, the teenagers, the young adults can see that they need to tread carefully around mum. They're frustrated, she's on a short fuse, finding that they're avoiding communal areas in the house, is worried about what the reception's going to be. And then at work, you know, just finding that she's noticed that people again are treading around her. She realizes that people can tell she's not herself, but they're not really sure what's wrong. She's got a male line manager, doesn't really want to talk or doesn't feel comfortable about talking to him or the younger people around. So the point of this is to sort of illustrate that, you know, this woman, despite being surrounded by people, she is feeling isolated. She is feeling lonely because of all of those symptoms that she's experiencing and the impact that those symptoms of generally low estrogen, it's a hormonal issue, are having on women around her. And I think it also illustrates, you know, this is not unusual. This could be any one of us, how many roles that we have to juggle, you know, when trying to deal with all of these symptoms. So, Sue, I'd really, really love to hear your thoughts. You know, there are so many different people here to consider. There's a partner, there's children, there's work, there's friends who might be calling and feeling rejected and stop calling as a consequence. Throwing the ball over to you, you know, sort of just unpicking this, where would you start?
Right. Well, I know we shared this yesterday.
Yeah.
But as you have said it to me now live, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, if this was a client that was coming to me, I would pick up all that tension and anxiety. I can feel it. It's just been onto me, and I am identifying with it. So, and even though this isn't a real person, I'm just how many of the participants here today are going, I get it, I know exactly what's going on, because this is part a journey that somebody who is menopausal will go through, as well everybody else that they come into contact. So I think the menopause doesn't affect the woman, the menopause affects everybody around them. And what we need is a dialogue to ensure, even thinking about loneliness as the heading, that the woman doesn't feel lonely, but the people around her, her children, don't feel lonely. They don't feel excluded. It doesn't have those negative repercussions. And the husband, he's going to probably be feeling quite isolated, and he's not wanting to kind of go towards his wife, which then makes her feel worse, makes him feel worse. And as you say, in the workplace, she might not even want to go into work. It might be too hot. She might be working in a shop, a nurse. So there are so many things that I would like to touch on. But for her, where she's coming from, it's done. And I know we talked before in other sessions about knowledge is power, but knowledge is empowering for everyone. So if she was coming to see me without her husband and not as a family therapist, I wouldn't see them all in family therapy, and I don't think you would need to do that anyway. I would make some suggestions to her, and probably the husband as well, if he was happy to come in and see me, but if we could do it a bit vicariously, is to say, let's have a conversation about how to have a conversation. Be honest about the symptoms, because somebody looking in, like with any stress that somebody in the environment are experiencing, it's the observer that will notice the stress first. You won't notice it. You might be feeling uptight, you can't sleep, but other people around you will see it. So if you can enable them to have some sort of dialogue where you can ask your children or your friends or your husband to be able to say to you, I'm noticing that this is how you're feeling. Now, if somebody had said that to me and I was up here, I would probably go up to there and I'd be saying, what do you mean you're noticing this? I'm absolutely fine. But it's having that way of communicating with each other and saying, I am going to take on board what you're saying. I may respond as a knee-jerk reaction, being very annoyed, but I'm here. Now, there are things that can be done with a partner. There's something called the dialogue wheel, and I can give that to you to put on at the end. And it enables a way to communicate in a very structured way with a partner, with your children, so that people can actually say how they are being affected by mum's behaviour. I could just talk forever, so please stop me and ask me questions.
No, it's really useful, Sue. I think so. I think what we've picked up on the first off is dialogue, isn't it? It's the need to be listened to, but to know where to start with having those conversations.
Yeah.
And I think if I might jump in, because there's some people on the call are sharing their experience and so on, really echoing and reinforcing that the case study that we've come up with is real life for many women, as you both said. And some people sharing their experience that Anna, thank you for sharing, her relationship with her mother never recovered from menopause. And at the other end, another woman who's saying she's really struggling to have this conversation with her daughter, which really highlights the importance of tonight's conversation. We've got to break that generational pass-through. So that our relationships with husbands or wives, with children, don't get to such a damaged place where they don't recover. So there's a kind of a practical question in there. If we start off with a daughter or a partner, how can you start that conversation? What advice can we give people on the call this evening to really think about how they start that conversation or get into it?
I would, it's about having some really focused time where there is no blame. So it might be over a kitchen table, but just having a cup of tea, maybe with your daughter, and be vulnerable, to be able to say, I am struggling. And if I react in a certain way towards you, it is truly, it's about me, it isn't you. And I know that's sort of a cliche, isn't it? People will say, oh, it isn't me, it's me, it isn't you. But for them to be able to see what's happening and sharing all this information that you give out on your website about what the menopause is, so that maybe this woman's daughter can learn that actually this is what can happen if your hormones are fluctuating. You're having reduction in your estrogen. I know I'm not medical and this is Claire's side, but to actually open up the conversation and to be able to do that, but sharing the knowledge that this woman has about the menopause. And maybe then the daughter might understand. I don't know how old the daughter is, but maybe she has mood swings, she's going through periods. Years ago, we didn't talk about periods to anyone. And somebody said to me the other day, when she was at school, she was given a mood diary when she was at school and to go home and share it with her mum. She went home, shared it with her mum. Mum said, yeah, this is great. We can see where your moods are fluctuating. Maybe this mum can share something about her own mood diary, noticing what's happening. But this young woman who was talking to me the other day, she said, but don't tell your dad. Don't talk to your dad about you having periods. And I think there's something about the menopause that don't tell people in the workplace, don't tell your brother or whatever, you know, about me going through my menopause. I think we have to get rid of this stigma, because why is it a stigma? It's natural. It's really normal. So I think having conversations, if it is possible to do that, it gets rid of the stigma. And as I say, try to say I'm being vulnerable. I'd be really interested, you know, maybe that person might say, if she feels that could help. If she feels it can't help, then I'd be happy to have a conversation, or I'm sure other people would be happy to have a conversation. But
please do keep the comments coming in the chat. And Claire and Sue, I just popped in the link to the menopause fact sheet. So that's something. So do you want to pick up on that, Claire, in terms of having that conversation?
Absolutely, I'd love to. And I think it's from my experience of explaining menopause symptoms to women, and just taking away some of the mystery. Like, you know how so many women will say, oh, my memory, my word finding, I'm sure I'm getting dementia. I saw my mother, I looked after my mother with dementia, I'm sure I'm getting it. And you know, that light bulb moment of when you explain, no, it's the loss of estrogen that's making your brain behave or not behave in this way. And maybe that's another way in, and hence sharing our fact sheet, you know, as Sue is brilliantly saying about opening the conversation, but also sort of, it's not blame as such, but taking some of the focus away from behavior and just talking about, look, this is massive swings of hormones that is changing my brain. And I'm really sorry I'm behaving this way. And as Sue said, it's me, it's not you. But I know it may seem as if I'm being critical, stroke ratty, stroke shouty, stroke delete as above, you know, sort of explaining that there are changes. And Sue, I don't know what you think about this, but as you've sort of touched on, you know, periods and puberty, oh my life, the massive changes that happen there. If you can sort of draw comparisons and sort of get a sort of kinship going, you know, you're feeling like this, I'm feeling like this, the root cause is the same, just to try and again create a little more empathy.
And that's so important. And there's Dame Leslie, she's just introduced the Women's Health Strategy, which is coming out in spring 2022. And that's about moving in the right direction of, we're not poo-pooing or hiding under the carpet periods or menopause or anything. And I heard her on the radio the other day, and she was talking about, we have to think about families, the world, everything is holistic. And I think that's about menopause, isn't it? That you know, if I can't do my job on my own, I need you with my clients. And Dame Leslie, she said something about the way she wants to have this women's health strategy is to think about, we no longer take our car to have an MOT and say, right, well, we have the tyres fitted at this garage, therefore it will pass its MOT with the tyres, and then you have to go to another garage down the road and have your battery checked or your brakes checked. What we want to do is it under one umbrella, so that medical professions, psychological professions can all work together. And I think that's the same within the family system as well. Everybody can pull together. I know that's the medical side, but what you were saying about this, you know, this young girl may be starting her periods. Let's do it collaboratively. Let's all pull together. And something that I'd written down here, that people, and I know I alluded to this before, people will spot your struggles before you do. So allowing people to notice your irritability, get the family to say, which I said before, but this young girl or boys or partners, they'll be having their own stories. We're not going to be governed by the menopause, you know, they've got their own world and things will be happening to them. So if you can create this lovely balance that everybody can pull together, you know, the guy may be having prostate problems, and he may not be able, if it's a sexual problem, to have erections or whatever it might be. Everybody can pull together rather than individualized, keeping it under various umbrellas.
That's a really nice way of thinking about the fluidity, and how that it's one person isn't an isolated system, that everybody has an impact on everybody else in a way. Is that right, Sue? It's not just the menopause, it is the menopause, but the impact on other people who will also have their issues also.
Yeah.
Just a quickie link to what you've just said there, Claire and Sue, kind of recognizing that, in the people around us in our family, menopause might not be the main event for them. One of the people on the call this evening is saying that her daughter is in her early 30s and just had her first child a year ago, and she doesn't want to listen or sympathize at all. And clearly it's clear that perimenopause, this woman is at perimenopause for 9 years, and it's really taking its toll. She's 54 and feels 90. So do you have any advice for her, Sue, if you saw her coming in to see you in a counselling session, about, is there a bridge that she can build with her daughter? Because clearly her daughter has a lot going on with having a young baby as well in the family, but to help her feel like she's more supported. And thank you for that comment.
Yeah, thank you. So I may not be honing in on the real problem here, but what I look at is there a mutual trap? So this is sort of very IACT way of working. So you around depression, so just thinking about depression, if people are having low mood, the daughter's just had a baby, she's going through probably many things with this child, mum is perimenopausal, so there might be something that is happening there that is keeping them kind of trapped and not able to communicate. What I would do is try and find out, is there some way that they can have some empathic joining? Is there one thing that they might be able to talk about that could pull them together? So you're not looking for tolerance, you're not looking for either to tolerate, but to see how they can come to some acceptance within the relationship. Have I got I can't see the question, but is that?
Yeah, is that I think that's it's that building the connection, but kind of at both ends. And I know to deal with some of these, you need a proper counselling session to get in, but I think that framing is really helpful. Claire?
Yes, and I would say if you're 54 and really the perimenopause is taking its toll, is keep going back and asking for help with, if you haven't done already, with different ways that you might be able to manage. I know that wasn't exactly the question, and the question is more about the relationship, but there may be ways that you can feel better also.
Yeah. And Claire, we've got some questions coming in about HRT and symptoms, and I suggested on the chat that we'll take those at the end, so we're not ignoring them. We'll take them at the end. But just maybe in terms of moving on to one of the other groups of people in life, there's a great question in here from Anna about a friend of hers who's really struggling in the workplace, and has a client struggling in the workplace. And Anna suggested that she raise awareness with her HR department to get help. And her reaction was that she'd end her career if she admitted to having a problem. And Claire, I'm sure you see many women, in your practice, private and NHS, who come in with the same issue. What advice would you give them? And Sue, it'd be great to then get your perspective on workplace. But Claire, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so in terms of the workplace, it's such a common issue. So in terms of practical steps, so seek help. Obviously, if you're struggling, please ask for help from either in terms of psychological help, in terms of medical help, in terms of talking about the options for managing menopause symptoms. But in terms of the workplace and the responsibility they have, then I totally hear what you say about, you know, women being, it's almost fearing that, Helen, you've said this before, that the menopause is just another stick for them to beat you with. But I do honestly believe that that is changing, that more and more workplaces, we're seeing it through my Menopause Centre, are now creating menopause policies. And there's almost pressure on them, I think, to create these policies. So I would really encourage them to talk to somebody in the HR department. There may be occupational health that you can go and see attached to a company. Ask if there's a menopause champion attached. Ask if there's a menopause cafe where you can go and talk about your symptoms, because again, I always think about the menopause in vicious cycles, that, you know, we know that symptoms get worse. I hear it all the time with anxiety, with feeling isolated. You know, anxiety is such a common symptom in the menopause. Anxiety feeds into that poor concentration, poor memory that you might experiencing, again, because the loss of estrogen. So if you can help alleviate some of that anxiety, anxiety makes hot flushes worse, you know, so what can you do? What physical changes can be made? You know, workplaces almost aren't allowed to ignore you. You know, there have been successful cases where women have, I know it takes a lot of strength and resource to do this, but there have been cases that have been taken under the is it the Disability Act. And I know that there's pressure now to try and get the menopause made into a protected characteristic so you've also got legal protection. So yeah, it's talking, raising awareness, finding somebody appropriate to raise awareness with, because that woman will not be the only person in the workplace struggling with this.
Yeah, and Claire, just a build on that, I think, if you think about the counterfactual, what will happen if she doesn't raise it? Probably the pressure she's feeling under with symptoms and concerns probably about her performance.
Yeah.
And it just builds and builds, and that in itself can be a significant driver of stress and anxiety, which further fuels the vicious cycle, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah. And you know, with my GP hat on, you're issuing sick notes. I speak to women who are off sick as a result of the menopause because they haven't got the right support and the right help that would just flick that switch and enable the ship to turn around in a more positive direction. It's a really real problem.
Yeah.
And I think when you said then, Claire, that this woman, and I'm sorry, I don't know her name, it hasn't come up for me, but she is not alone. Really, much as she feels alone, she isn't. This wouldn't be happening. We wouldn't be talking now if she was the only woman we were talking to. And so I feel as if it would be really lovely if we could kind of just all get together and support her and say, this is the way to do it. My whole background is in HR, and if she's not being listened to, I'm just wondering, and maybe she's not feeling like it, but could she be that person that has the knowledge, learning from here and, you know, all the other websites and things that she can look at, that she can go in and talk about, you know, this is happening to me, you need to listen to me. And actually there's Wix, DFS and Santander have a very good support system for people experiencing the menopause and how to support them. It might be worth just contacting them to see what do they do. And I'm sure the HR department would be happy to share. They advertise it, this is what they do for their employees. So it just might be useful to get some information. You know, things like even clothing. If you're getting really hot, and if you're working on a shop floor, you're entitled to decent clothing, not horrible sort of sweaty stuff. You know, you want bamboo clothes, and you know, there's so much that can be done. Maybe we need to do a talk on that as well. But they need to be able to offer support and flexibility, and it needs to be personalised support as well, expert personalised support. She can be the ambassador for her firm. Be the ambassador. We'll help you do it.
I suspect if Anna is her coach, she might be senior in her organization. And I think depending on the culture of the organization, for in many still, unfortunately, organizations, as a woman, you can feel quite lonely when you're senior. The more senior you get, the lonelier it gets anyway, I think, whether you're a male or a female. But it can be particularly acute if you're a woman. But then on top of that, if you're a woman going through menopause. So maybe thinking about other networks that are out there of senior women, to tap into them for support and advice, because, and it's great that she has you to speak to, Anna, as well, but just thinking about other women in similar or different environments that she can speak to draw on for advice, and we'd be very happy to follow up offline to link into some of them, and we have some of them shared their stories with us as well on the website as well, so we'll include this in the email that will follow. Now, I'm really conscious of time because unbelievably we've just got 20 minutes left, and I know there are some HRT related questions that we would want to cover at the end. I wonder, we've covered, you know, the workplace, I think, and we've covered children. Is it worth just a quick chat around partners in particular, in particular the isolation that can come from loss of libido? And I know we've done a whole separate event on that, but Dr. Clare and Sue, any kind of thoughts and advice on how you have the conversations with your partner and deal with the frustrations that might exist on both parties with their husband or wife or partner?
Yes, Sue, I would love to hear you speak about this, because I get asked to prescribe testosterone for loss of libido quite a lot. It's a really frequent request, and I'm always glad to prescribe if it's appropriate. But often when you scratch beneath the surface, there's been a bit of a breakdown of communication, a sort of not wanting to admit what's really going on, and wanting the testosterone almost to be a bit of a magic bullet to sort of solve all that. So, Sue, I would love to hear some top tips from you on this.
Okay, well, I think maybe for some it is a magic bullet, but then what happens is they have a partner in, sometimes, usually, maybe in their 50s or 60s or 40s or what. And they've got this woman who then wants mad, passionate sex. And you know,
then the man can't cope. Yes.
Yeah, so you might want a bit more, but then, you know, you have to be careful what you wish for. So that is what I find sometimes. But what I like to do is to say to people, it isn't all about penetrative sex. Let's just slow down a little bit. Let's do some touching. Let's do some nice date nights. And I know I've mentioned this in the other one, but be able to really connect. Lovely exercises that you can do, some tantric sex where you do not need to penetrate. You can touch people, not people, or touch each other. And it doesn't matter, you know, if you're same sex as well, you may have a partner who is at a different place when it comes to the menopause. One may still want to be intimate and the other one doesn't. It's about what to do. So I always take it right back to basics and say, let's just put penetrative intercourse on the side, because sex is about foreplay. Go back, enjoy the foreplay. And of course, there are lubes if you want to have penetrative sex, but start that connection again. If you're not communicating, if one of you is irritable, if one of you doesn't want to go out because you're feeling that you're not very happy with the world around you at the moment, you know, there are all sorts of different things and every relationship is different. But I talk about sitting on the sofa together, really connecting. And again, it's all down to communication, isn't it? That's what I keep going back to. Let's connect. Libido, if low libido and you can't have testosterone, if you can't have estrogen and you have low libido, there's more to connection. you know, kissing, making sure that when your partner leaves in the morning, you hug them, even if you don't want to kiss. Make sure there's that connection. And love languages, you know, check out what your partner's love language is. What do they really want to receive, and find out. There's a quiz, free quiz, 5 love languages. Start at basics, find out what do they want to receive, and give them what they would like to receive.
Because actually, it might be, I know this sounds really basic, a cup of tea in the morning, mightn't it? You know, there are so many different ways and levels of connection. Somebody might feel the love from having a cup of tea. Somebody else might have some completely different idea. But it's finding out, do you think, Sue, that's the most important thing?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it takes away some of the anxiety as to what you think your partner might be thinking, but actually there might not be.
Yeah.
And
And so,
Claire,
yes, sorry.
so I'm just wondering of the, you know, the women that you see in your clinic, how many of them do you think feel that their partners understand what it is that they're going through? Just as, you know, if we get back to real basics in terms of what's going on.
Is that to me or Sue?
For you, Claire. So when women are coming in presenting with menopause symptoms and you're there to treat them, and if as they're understanding what's going on themselves and they think about their support they're getting or not getting at home, do you have any sense of, you know, how much understanding there is actually of just what the menopause is with their partners, and then what that means for them?
Yeah, I think it's really variable. I think I see all ends of the spectrum. I've done some consultations with both members, you know, with a husband and wife or 2 female partners. So there's a discussion, which is amazing, as to what's going on and the impact. But then, you know, I probably talk to more women who are feeling more isolated, who just desperately want help so they can go back to fitting that normal slot that they play in their family life of CEO of the household, because there are all these expectations on them and nobody really understands what they're going on. And I think we've just, you know, talking back to the beginning and the full circle of needing to have the conversations with those around. So I would say probably I speak to more women who do, you know, lots of women will say I've got a really understanding partner, but I probably talk to more who, yeah, they're really getting fed up with me. Actually, I can feel the frustration. There's probably more women voicing those sorts of concerns than those coming on the consultation with their partner.
Yeah. And is that something that you'd recommend, that women think about bringing their partner with them to a consultation?
That's a really good question. I think it depends on your relationship. I think there's something about having that one-on-one time, isn't there, with somebody else, having that one-on-one listening. But then when it comes to explaining what's going on and why, I think it's really powerful. You know, I see the powerful effect it has on the women I'm speaking to. So, you know, the powerful effect that could potentially have, that penny drop moment on their partner as well. Maybe you should have both, one-on-one and then one with your partner might be a nice idea.
Yeah, because then I suppose maybe in doing so, it might help alleviate some of the frustration, or maybe some of the perceived frustration.
Yes.
That maybe the frustration isn't there. Maybe it's just, you know, we all know when you're going through a tough time, menopause symptoms can kind of cloud so much of what you're perceiving, you know, of what's actually happening versus your perception of what's happening. So maybe a thought to leave people with, and maybe a thought for us to think about a future event for couples. So for people to bring their partners to kind of give a better understanding of menopause. But hopefully the leaflet that we've put out there with the basics will help people understand just the extensiveness of menopause symptoms and the age and the duration, and hopefully that will generate some empathy as well. Just last couple of questions before we go into the Q&A. Now, Sue, you mentioned the love quiz. I've got it wrong, the love language quiz. You must send us the link and we'll put that out with the email, because I'm sure I'm not the only one thinking I must take the love language quiz.
And teenagers can do it too. There's one for children as well, so maybe get the whole family to do it.
It sounds amazing, so we'll definitely share that.
Could I just pick something else as well there that you just sort of alluded to about when you are working with a couple or with a partner of the person that has come to you because they're coming, say the woman's coming saying, I'm going through the menopause, I'm not feeling good, and they're talking. I always invite the man in, or the partner, if it's same sex, invite them in. And what I find out is really interesting is that the partner is feeling quite invisible, that they do have stuff going on too. And I give them feedback, unless there's confidentiality and they don't want me to share things, and I share what has been said and I give them that information. And it's amazing just seeing people's faces when they say, gosh, I didn't know you felt like that, I didn't know that was happening. I didn't know you felt that way. And again, it is about communication, but it really opens up that sense of not feeling isolated. It isn't only the woman that might feel isolated and alone, it can be a partner too. So
Thank you,
really
Sue. So thoughts, quick recommendations on websites or other resources to look at, and we'll put this in the email as well to go out to everyone after this.
I mean, really super briefly from my point of view, I think if you're wondering at all if you are in that menopause transition and you want sort of targeted help, I'd have a look at my Menopause Centre questionnaire, because it will take you through the symptoms and sort of give specific advice. I know it's general, but on each individual symptom. I think the Women's Health Concern and the British Menopause Society, if you want the scientific basis to what's going on, they're quite good, more scientific based websites. And when I'm working in general practice, I often refer people to Mind, actually, for more information on mental health, more information on medications surrounding mental health. I do think that is a useful resource. But Sue, I know you'll have many more on the sort of more communication side of things.
Yeah, and I'll pass them on to Helen so that they can go on to the website or the information at the end. But there's Henpicked, isn't there? Henpicked's really good. You can go on there and listen to people talking about various things. But I agree with Mind. And when I was looking to talk today, Mind do top tips on loneliness, and they say take it slow. Make new connections, try peer support, try to open up, talking therapies, and check yourself, checking in with yourself, and not compare yourself to others, and remember self-care. And I think they're just so important, and very gentle about being kind to yourself and gentle. And then of course there's which we talked about previously about the CBT. If you can go to ask for CBT, you don't necessarily have to go through your GP. You have to be registered with the GP, but contacting the NHS to have CBT, and the Menopause Society NICE recommend CBT should you be suffering from anxiety, and they're very focused. They don't do any of the sort of psychodynamic work. They don't look at past. They help you focus on situations and giving you thoughts and emotions and any physical feelings and actions, how you're working at this moment in time, how you are. So you can go on their website, which is www.nhs.uk, just put CBT, and there's loads of information talking about stopping the negative cycle.
Brilliant.
And could I just say something else as well? And it's just about GP.
Yeah.
But we mentioned about talking to your GP. So, talking to your family, talking to your children. and workplace, friends who may have pulled away, or you've pulled away from them because you just feel irritable, or they might not want to be anywhere near you, to be able to open up that conversation. But talking to a GP as well, I think it's really important how you go in and talk to them. And something that my partner says is, you know, sort of state your ideas, your concerns and expectations. Go in, tell them, you know this, Claire, obviously, but tell them what you want. You know, don't sort of pussyfoot around, and give them the information of how you're feeling and what you want. Obviously, you know, they may say that isn't what's wrong with you, but, you know, be straight, talk to them.
That's brilliant, Sue.
Is that okay?
Brilliant, absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
There are brilliant top tips, and I know the menopause questionnaire on our website is a distillation of, you know, all of Claire's expertise, and a lot of women we know are using it to take into their GP to show them, you know, the symptoms they have, the advice from a menopause expert like Claire, and to help them be more assertive and to give them that confidence boost going in into being assertive for what they're looking for. And Claire, while I scroll up to look through the questions, because I know you might have a couple of other thoughts and advice and tips around how do you make sure you get to the right GP in your surgery as well. So if you want to maybe talk to that while I scroll up and look at the questions that we'll fire over in HRT.
Oh yeah, no, that's great. Thanks, Helen. I think it's fair to say GPs are putting HRT and the menopause definitely more on their radar, but there is still a long way to go. So in terms of finding the right GP, some GPs are absolutely brilliant and have a real passion and interest in women's health. And to try and find those people, then I would ask the receptionist actually to begin with who they would go and see. I'd ask around in your area, because the chances are most people will belong to the same practice. So ask who the GP is who's better at the menopause or has more of an interest in women's health. If you look on the practice website, actually, usually the practice will have biographies of all the GPs as well. And then I think you have to brace yourself to wait on the phone, to wait for an appointment, to accept that sadly that appointment is only 10 minutes long. Some GP practices now have a 15-minute appointment. But if you think it's going to take, it's really interesting to time what you can do in 10 minutes. And it is rapid if you have a few questions and answers. But you can try asking for a double appointment. Some practices will say no, not to begin with. The doctor will decide if you need a double appointment, but it's always worth an ask. And, you know, I know we've mentioned it a few times. I would go with a resource like either the results from our menopause questionnaire. There's something called the Green Climacteric Scale, which is a list of symptoms where you can literally tick the box and show them. You know, you don't even have to say these are my symptoms. You can just show them the sheet or make a list, show the list. And then go with an idea also, you know, what do you want to get out of that consultation? Sometimes it's validation of symptoms, that you're not going bonkers. Sometimes you might want HRT. Starting HRT, if you know nothing about HRT in a 10-minute appointment, is challenging. So you might want to say, look, I think I want HRT. Do you agree? It could be a good option for me. Can I have another appointment to discuss that or to finalize it, or go with an idea? Don't be afraid to say what you want. The GP will be quite happy if you go and say, I think this is what they want. They'll go, phew, great, marvelous. That will save a bit of time. So yeah, they're my top tips.
Thank you, Claire. Yeah, it is challenging, and it is actually pretty appalling that women have to put up with such a service, to be honest. It really highlights the gap in women's healthcare. And that's why, though, it is brilliant to see the level of campaigning that's now happening, the conversations that we're having here with everyone here this evening. But it's really important that we've got to be assertive and stand up for women's rights to good quality healthcare. That is hugely important. So we've got some HRT questions. Claire, if it's okay with you, I'll call them out. and we'll just rattle through them. And again, apologies, everyone. Claire won't be able to go into very detailed individual responses because she obviously doesn't have people's medical history, but we'll look to answer them at a high level. And I've just posted in some resources, information on HRT and on the menopause questionnaire, which hopefully will help people. So Claire, first question that we got in, and I'm just going to go through them in the Q&A because they actually flow pretty well in the chat, is this is from a woman who's going through surgical menopause, and feels she needs to have higher estrogen. She's an implant and 50 milligrams of estrogen, but feels it should be 100. That would be better. Do you have any views, Claire, as to what surgical menopausal women's levels should be? Is it the higher the better?
Yeah. So super briefly, you can actually have too much estrogen and it makes you feel anxious. You can have hot sweats and anxiety because the levels are too high. If you've got an implant, I suspect that they will check your levels, and you're roughly aiming for between 200 to 800 or 1,000 picomoles per litre for the estradiol level, depending on your consultant. Some take 800, some take 1,000. Definitely, usually you don't want the estrogen over 1,000. So yeah, you just need to ask the question about checking of levels and tell the doctor your symptoms and why you think you need more estrogen. Generally, after a surgical menopause, women need more estrogen because when you take the ovaries away, you take all last vestiges of ovarian function, because the ovaries do carry on making a minute amount of estrogen following the menopause.
That's great, and I'm sure that was a very helpful response, Claire. Thank you. Thank you. Now, we've had a couple of questions in here around anxiety, and interestingly, relating to losing confidence in driving on the motorway. And I know it's something you hear a lot. So what would you recommend, Claire, for women with those symptoms?
Yes, ask for help. So I experienced this. I couldn't understand it. It was an early symptom of the perimenopause, and I used to distract myself by eating huge bags of Maltesers as I was driving, which I really would not recommend. It's very bad for you. Ask for help and voice that concern, voice that, because that, you know, that is a manifestation of your anxiety, and hopefully with the right HRT or talking therapies, then it should get better. Mine got better. I'm now very happy on the horrendous M6.
Yeah, and I think HRT kind of massively helps, as you say, with that as well. It can help massively.
So common. It's a really common symptom when you ask women about it. Yeah.
We've got another question here, and then I think we've just got one after this, Claire. This is a woman who's on estrogen gel and Estrogen, but the estrogen causes breast pain quite badly. And she was recommended to use 2 pumps of gel initially, but was having trouble tolerating it, went down to 1. But then when she went down to 1, her symptoms came back.
Yeah.
So what advice do you give? Because she's on a 6-month wait, or she's on a long wait to see her doctor again.
Yeah. So the estrogel can cause breast tenderness, and I don't know if it's because you get quite a good peak and trough of estrogen during the day. You might be better with a patch. Try a patch, because you get a more of a steady level of estrogen over 24 hours. So sometimes that helps. Anti-inflammatories can help breast pain while it's settling down. If you can take anti-inflammatories, it's the only thing that there's any evidence for oil of evening primrose for, but you do have to take quite a lot of it. But if at the end of the day, if it's caused by, it's a side effect of the estrogel, then I would advise you to switch to a patch. And you could try emailing your GP practices. A lot of them have an e-reception, and say, would you consider switching? And I think this is on our website, but basically 1 pump of gel is equivalent to a 25 microgram patch. So if you need 2 pumps to control your symptoms, then you need a 50 microgram patch, again with the Estrogen that you were taking before to protect the womb lining.
Thank you, Claire, and I really hope that's helped, because I'm obviously really sorry to hear that that's what you're going through, and it's taking so long to get help. Yeah. And then last comment then, and thank you for the feedback, Christine. Christine found out that she was perimenopausal after having it with a 2-year-old child. And I can definitely relate to that, having my second child at 42 and then almost straight, you know, a couple of years later, who would have thought? And really interesting point that she's raising around younger women not being very understanding and thinking it's kind of for old women. So it might be nice and kind of observations from you, Claire, and you, Sue, on that. This is one that I feel is so important for us to address.
And we haven't talked about younger women, which we hope to fit in. I know it's really difficult. Younger women with menopause at a younger age, surrounded by women who don't identify, don't understand. It has to be having the conversation, and just hopefully everything that's happening in the media will educate everybody so everybody has understanding. But my heart goes out because I hear that a lot from younger women. Sue?
Yeah, and for me, it's if everybody can come from a place of understanding, you know, and then the knowledge is empowerment. It's not power and I know more than everybody else. It's empowerment, and everybody's empowered. And fortunately, I hope that all these young women will go through the menopause and have a good experience. And as you say, there's so much out there. And even just listening to these chats, if people are listening now and they think, well, I didn't learn anything, well, that's great. That's brilliant, because they already know it, and that's wonderful. And if they did learn something, then that's great. It's just that one more piece of information to help with this jigsaw. So, yeah.
What a lovely way of summing it up, Sue. That's it really is a lovely way of summing it up. And I kind of think the way I think about it with younger women is I really hope that fact sheet that we put into the chat, and we'll send it out, will help, because what a lot of younger women don't realize is that menopause for most women will start in their 40s, so much younger than they think. But 1% of women will go through a premature menopause under the age of 40. So it really is empowering them with knowledge so that they can help themselves. But if they're less concerned about that, I found it helpful in framing it as, this can help you with your mother, it can help you with your aunts, it can help you with your friends and with your colleagues. So even if you never were interested for your own sake, if you're interested in being supportive of people around you, then it's a good thing to understand. So maybe on that front. Claire, I'm going to squeeze in one last question here from Elizabeth, and this is absolutely it in the night on HRT. Why are patches more consistent compared to estrogel?
Oh, estrogel, you put it on your skin and it absorbs, and you get a peak level after 2 hours, and then it slowly drops. So you get more of a peak and a trough during the day. You wear the patch the whole time, and so you will get a bit of an up and down, but it's a lot more of a gentle up and down because it's releasing all the time.
Very clear, Claire. Thank you very much for that. So I'd like to say a big thank you to everybody for joining us this evening. I hope you found the conversation really helpful and insightful. And I'd like to say a really big thank you to Dr. Clare and to Sue. And these events always look so easy to pull off, but both women and Sue in particular have done a huge amount of work and research in preparation for tonight's event to make their advice, thoughts and recommendations as useful and as relevant to you as possible. So I'd like to say a really big, sincere thank you to you both, and Sue, to you in particular, because I know you've been working really hard over the last few days and the weekend to make sure that you were giving everyone the best possible advice. And I can see from the chat and the feedback that it has landed. So thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And thank you, Claire. So good night, everyone. Take care and enjoy this beautiful spring weather. Bye-bye.
Bye.